Hello. So today we're going to talk about finding the area of a circle. Now, for many of you, this will seem like just a review, which is great, and for some of you, it may be brand new, which is fine as well. So remember, area is a way to measure the number of square units needed to cover a figure. So with a circle, it becomes a little complicated because it doesn't have straight edges. So how do you find that amount of square units to cover a circle where square units have straight edges? Well, it's actually quite simple. This was thought of a long time ago, and what we actually found out was that there's a ratio between that and this number pi. Hmm. And it all comes from if we were to take a square and we were to have this curve here, how many times would things fit within that curve? It actually would be a fourth of pi. So if we took four of these and put them together, we would have one whole pi. And so that's why the circle has pi involved in it. You can do some research on that, and I can do another video on that if you would like. Just let me know. I'll do it. But this is where this idea of pi comes from. And this is why we use that in order to find out the area of a circle. Because if we were just to find the area of a square, well, this would just be this length times itself, because this would be the same. What would that length be? Because this is coming from a circle, we know that this length is actually the radius, r. And so this would be r times r. Well, this is a fraction of that r times r. Well, how much of it is it? It's pi. So this is why the area of a circle is actually pi r squared, because this would be r times r, which would be r squared. Okay, and that's actually where it comes from. So that is the area of a circle. It's pi times the radius squared every single time. Well, okay, let's actually use that to solve for the area of a circle. So if I had a circle that had a radius of 1 over pi, how would we find the area of that circle? Well, let's take a look to see. We would take the area equals pi times the radius squared, so 1 over pi squared, and we will end up with pi times 1 over pi squared. And so here in this case, we would end up with just 1 over pi, because pi divided by pi squared would just give us pi down here in the denominator. Okay, cool. Well, that one may not have been as fun as some others that you've seen. So let's make it, let's use a number besides pi. Let's use something besides a transcendental or irrational number. Let's use, like, say, the number 2 for the radius. How about that? So we'll put the number 2 here. Okay? Let's find the area of the circle when the radius is 2. Well, area is still pi times the radius squared. So it'll be pi times 2 squared. 2 squared is 4, so we end up with 4 pi. And of course, these are square units. Okay? Probably seems very simple. That's because it is. So all we're doing is taking pi and multiplying times the radius squared. And that's how you find the area of a circle. Well, let's say you didn't know what the radius was to begin with. Let's say you only knew the diameter. Okay, let's say the diameter is 10 centimeters. And that's all we know. We want to find the area of the circle when the diameter is 10 centimeters. Well, that's no problem. Area is still pi times the radius squared, but we don't know the radius. How do we find it? Well, remember, the radius is half the diameter. So for us to use the formula that we have for area, we would do 10 divided by 2, 10 centimeters divided by 2, because the diameter divided by 2 will give us the radius. We'll square that. So we get pi times 5 centimeters squared, and that gives us 25 pi centimeters squared. Because 5 squared will give us 25. 25 times pi is 25 pi, and centimeters squared. Of course, if you wanted to input that into your calculator to get an approximation, that's perfectly fine. Okay, it's still fairly simple. When does it get more complicated? Okay, so another thing that could happen is you may have to find the radius a different way. You could be given a tangent line and an angle, and because you know the radius and the tangent line have to be perpendicular, you could use right triangle trigonometry to find the radius. You could be given all kinds of scenarios where you have to find the radius. But I'll give you the one that most commonly comes up, and that's when you know the distance around the entire circle. Remember, distance around was the circumference. So we're still going to look for the area of the circle, but this time we know that the distance around the circle, or the circumference, is equal to, let's say, 3 pi meters. It's 3 pi meters long. Okay? How do we find the area of the circle when we know the circumference is 3 pi meters? Well, what does circumference really mean? Circumference was 2 times pi times the radius. Therefore, if the circumference is 3 pi meters, and that has to be equal to 2 pi times the radius, how would we solve for the radius? That's right, we would divide both sides by 2 pi. And then in that case, we end up with 1.5 meters is the radius, because 3 divided by 2 would give us 1.5. The pi divided by pi would go to 1. Okay, so we get 1.5 meters as the radius. Do we have enough information to find the area now? We do. We can substitute that in. And so we get the area is going to equal to pi times 1.5 squared, or meters squared. Okay. Now, when we do that, we end up with 2.25 pi meters squared, because we should have square units because we're talking about area. Okay. And that's all there is to it to finding the area of a circle. Now, when we look at the circumference of a circle, though, we have something called arc length, where we're looking at just a portion of the entire arc. Well, let's do the same thing with area. Let's say we only want to know this portion of it. How do we find just that portion of it? Well, we'll talk about that soon.